everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be sewing the Wynyard dress. I'm super excited about this one. Now I'm going to show you the pattern pieces. We have facing pieces right here, back bodice piece, front bodice piece, both of those cut on the fold. Front facing are also cut on the fold, but you will require interfacing if you're using a lightweight fabric. If you are using a mid-weight or a slightly heavier weight fabric, you're not going to need interfacing. Then we have the beautiful ruffle pieces. You're going to cut one of each on the fold. So one notch represents the front, two notches represent the back. Now, these are all the pieces that you're going to need for the top. The bottom, you are going to be using a skirt piece, or you can opt to use the measurements that I've included in the instructions, so you don't have to actually print this out. Now that we've spoken about that, let's get started with sewing. Okay, first up, we are going to mark all our notches. For these facing pieces right here, you're going to see that there is a diagonal line, like so. And the reason it is diagonal is so that you could see, I'll highlight that so you can see it. That's going to represent marking the middle. So anything cut on the fold, it's going to represent marking that on the middle, okay? So let's do that. Yours will have two little notches there for the back and one for the front, and so you're going to mark those so you don't get them confused later on. Marking the middle when they're cut on the fold, and then marking your notches for the front and the backs. And then one other notch will be this one right here. So if you're opting to do the tie, this is what that is for, okay? If you are not choosing to put in a tie, you do not need to mark that. Okay, now that I've gone ahead and marked all my notches, I triple checked, we're going to start sewing, yay! First step, we're going to grab our back and front facing. This is the right side and this is the wrong side. Now, because I am using this fabric that has a little bit more of a heft to it, I'm going to forego the interfacing. But if you have a lightweight garment, what you would be doing is you would have taken your pattern pieces, cut out interfacing with these, and then ironed it to the wrong side of your facing pieces. So you're going to pretend that there was interfacing here and here. Once you have interfaced your facing pieces, you are then going to finish the edges here, 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 and here. I'm going to be using a serger overlocker. I am also going to do that for the front and back bodice pieces while I'm here. Back from the machine, and you can see my serged edges right here, like that, like that. Now, if you don't have a serger, don't freak out. You can do a zigzag stitch, or you can be fancy and bind it with bias. I have done that now, and we're going to place our facing pieces just to the side. We'll revisit those in a minute. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the front and back bodice pieces and we're going to match them right sides together. So there's right side, right side. We're going to match those together up here at the shoulder point, and we're going to pin those. Now that I've returned back from the machine, you can see here that I've stitched that with the seam allowance and I've pressed it open. We need to stay stitch the armholes right here and right here. That prevents it from stretching as we are finishing off the neckline. If you don't do this, you run the risk of having your armhole gape because the fabric has stretched as you've been making your dress. After we've stay stitched both sides here, We are then going to repeat this process that we did for the shoulder seams with the facing pieces. So we're going to do right sides. There's the right side. There it is. Let's put that away. Right side here with right side. There we go. And you're going to stitch along here, and then press that open like we did with the front bodice. Once we've done that, we will move on to the next step. This is how your front and back bodice piece should be looking now. So we're still open at the sides, okay? We've attached it at the shoulders. We've pressed the seam allowances like so. And then, if I open this up like that, we have stay stitched the armholes right here. So stay stitching is putting it to the longest stitch length on your sewing machine and then running it in one row right here, and that's going to keep it from not stretching. We also repeated the same process at the shoulder seams for the facing pieces. So I've gone ahead, sewn that seam allowance, pressed it open. Now we need to finish this outer edge all the way around. So I'm going to show you that from the right side. Here's the right side. I have done bias around and it looks spectacular. So if you want a really polished look, I highly recommend that. For the sake of time, I'm just going to use my overlock and go all the way around. This is also the step if you want to include a tag. So you're going to locate your double notches that you marked earlier. There they are. This was the back part of your facing, and you can place your tag right there. Back from finishing my facing, so you can see that I serged all the way around on the outer edge and I added in my tag. Now we can pop these to the side and we're going to bring out our ruffle pieces. We're going to get rid of the actual pattern pieces, set that to the side, because we have marked our notches, so we can tell 2 notches back piece, 1 notch front piece. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the bodice piece and the facing. So we're going to do right sides together. So there's the right side. This is my back, as I can see with my notches. We're going to get the right side right here. And we're going to match it up at the shoulder seams again. Now, before we attach them to reduce bulk, we are going to finish in our chosen method. So for me, I'm going to overlock here and here, here and here. Then I will stitch the seam with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now it is time to check our work. So we have, once again, attached the ruffle at the shoulder seam. We finished it before, then we sewed it with the seam allowance, and then we pressed it open. Now that we've done that, it is time to finish the raw outer edges of the ruffle. For this, what we're going to do, you're going to apply this method to all of the outer edges, and you're going to fold this in like that, wrong sides together in 1 centimeter, and then in again like that. Okay, you're going to press that. Okay, and then you're going to do it here as well, and then in again and press. So when you're getting to the corners, you're going to have something that looks like this. And when you are sewing this down, when you're approaching these corners, you want to reduce your stitch length. That way your stitches get closer together, and that will prevent it from ever coming undone, because you're going to see there's bulk there, right? So if you're using a smaller stitch length, less likely to come undone. Now I'm going to go and do what I've just said, where I'm going to press the outer edges in once and then in again. And I'm going to press that all and bring it back so you can see what it looks like, and then we're going to stitch it down. back from the ironing board, and you can see here how it's looking. So I've pressed it in once, then pressed it in again. And if you need, after pressing, you can totally just pin along here. If that will help you keep it in place, I highly recommend doing so. Okay, we're back from sewing down the hem. So this is the right side, and you can see how beautiful and neat that's looking. And then on the wrong side, you can see that we've tacked down the corners, and that looks wonderful. Okay, next step, we are going to be putting in the gathering threads. Now the way this is going to work, we're going to do 2 lines of gathering stitches here, 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 and here. That means when you start this line here, and we're going like this for the first one, we're going to stop when we hit the next corner, and we're going to leave a long tail. Then we're going to do the second line. We're going to do it down here. We're going to stop, leave a long tail, and that is going to be how we gather it. Same along each of these edges. I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Back from the machine, I'm actually going to show you on the right side because it's easier to see in this case. Do you like how the beautiful daylight is coming in right now? Okay, so you can see I've done 2 rows on each side, but they do not join. So see, long tails here, long tails here, long tails here, long tails here. Now we're ready to put our bodice all together. First, we're going to start with the neckline. So we're going to grab our bodice piece, and we're going to put it right side facing up. Then we are going to get our ruffle, and we are going to match up our notches. So here's my front notches, my back notches are here, and we are going to match it wrong side to right side. Then we are going to pin at the corners like this. Match the middle notch. There we go. And then we're gonna let's flip it around so it's a little easier for me. I'm gonna do the same thing at the back. So pin at the corner, pin at the other corner, pin the middle notch right there. Great. And then for the side, and by side I mean shoulder seam, we're going to match this shoulder seam to the bodice shoulder seam. So you can see they go on top of each other right there. I'm going to pin that in place. And we're going to do the same for the other side. Ooh, it's flipped around there. Scusi. There we go. We're going to do the same like that. Okay, perfect. And once you've pinned at those spots, then you're going to grab your long tails right here, and then you're going to gather. You're going to tug them together so that your ruffle then matches up with your bodice neckline. now that we've gathered along all the edges of the neckline, we can take that to the machine and we're going to baste it in place. Back from the machine, and we have now basted that ruffle down. Look how pretty it is. So now we're going to grab the facing piece and we are going to match it right sides to the right side of the ruffle. And you are going to be using your notches again that we marked earlier. So you can see I've put in the tag so it's very clear to see that this is the back. So we're going to find our double notches, which are right here. So we're going to, once again, right side to right side of ruffle. And you're going to match up your notches and pin there, pin at the corners, pin at the shoulder seam, and then pin at the front notches and corners. And then you're going to sew that with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I also want to mention a little tip that I like to use. It might be a little hard to see on here, but I find to get the perfect corners when I am putting my facing in, I like to get a little ruler. I measure the 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then I like to mark like this direction, and then like this direction. And then you can see that creates that 1 centimeter seam allowance from that corner. So when you're sewing, it serves as a guide, and that way you don't have to guess. Okay, I'm back from the machine. And I've done the next step at the same time. So I was at the machine, I sewed down the facing, right side to right side of the ruffle. Then what I did is I went in and snipped at my corners. You can see that there. Now, if you have a thicker fabric, I do recommend grading down your seam allowance. Mine wasn't too bad with the bulk. So you can just have a feel. If that feels too bulky for you, then you can just trim down one of these 3 edges here and it will lay more flat. And then I pressed my facing inwards. So you can see each side here, I pressed it in, and you can see that the seam allowance is still there underneath. So then I went in and I understitched. Okay, and now an important note with understitching is you are starting your understitch about 1 centimeter away from that cut corner, and then you're going to do it all the way down that edge, and then you're going to stop 1 centimeter from the next corner. And you're going to continue to do that across each edge like I've done here. And the reason we do that is because it will allow it to lay flat when we put the facing in. So now we're going to do that, where we're going to take the facing and we're actually going to put it all the way inside, okay? Okay, and then your neckline is going to start taking shape. You can either edge stitch from the front side. I like to do it from the wrong side. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn this over. Okay, you're bringing in, oh, I should also note, I did take out all my basting stitches, okay, around the neckline. Okay, so you're gonna go like this, right? So you can see it's a beautiful finish on the inside. But when you are sewing, you're going to make sure you are not catching your ruffle. So your ruffle's gonna be out like that, okay? And you're going to stitch along your finished facing edge like that. Get back from the machine and look how pretty that neckline looks. And you can see it is very clean at the corners. And let's look at the back as well. There you go. And then you can see I have, sorry, lots of fluff everywhere. Okay, You can see that that is sewn down, but I did not catch the ruffle in it. And then this is it from the inside. You can see how wonderfully neat that is. And now we are ready to move on to the next part. Now I omitted the ties for this version, so I am not going to be showing that in this video. And we're going to move on to sewing down the side seam. So what you're going to do is you're going to get right sides together like that. You're going to pin that in place. And then you're going to repeat that on the other side. Take it to your machine. And then you're going to do a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to finish this edge together, and then you're going to press it towards the back. Okay, back from the machine, and you can see we've sewn that side seam, press it towards the back. Same with this side. So now you're going to bring this right side out. Whoop. Okay. It's looking cute. All right, and now we are ready to move on to the next part, which is finishing our armholes. For the armhole bias, I will be using pre-made bias, and look how cute this is. It's vintage. I've picked it up from Making Space Thrift, which is local to me, and it is 100% cotton, which I love. Usually I make my own bias, and the instructions are in the Wynyard instructions if you would like to do so yourself. Then you're going to make sure that your side seam is pressed backwards. Okay, so you can see my tag is there, so it goes this direction. And then you're going to pin this all the way around until you reach this end. And then when you reach this end, I like to do a little mark here. And then you are going to join this together at the mark that you made, stitch that down. Okay, I have done that. We're going to snip it off. So you don't want to snip off where you marked, you want to snip off with a little more of an added tail there. Then you're going to put right sides together of the bias, and you're going to match it up where you marked it, like that. And you want to make sure the bias is open all the way. Okay, like that. Okay, then you're going to sew this down here, cut away the excess, press it open, and that way it's going to fit your armhole exactly. Then you're going to go and stitch all the way around with 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch, or you could also just follow, if you're using pre-made bias, the fold that is in there. And then once we have done that, I will come back and show you the next step. Okay, back from the machine, you can see how I attached that together there, pressed it open, and then I sewed all the way around. Okay, and now what you're going to do, just like we did with the facing piece, we are going to push this away from the seam that we just did, but making sure that we have the seam allowance underneath, and then you are going to edge stitch all the way around, make sure to catch the seam allowance underneath. And then once you've done that, you will then press it all the way in, like so. And then you are going to edge stitch right here. And that's going to give you a beautiful armhole. Okay, finished that armhole, and you could see this is what it looks like on the outside. You cannot tell it's there, which is wonderful. And then the inside, you will have 2 stitches. This is the understitch stitch that we did where you're holding that seam allowance to the bias, and that way when it gets washed or you're moving around, you're not going to see that bias coming through. And then you've got this second stitch right here, which is the one that you can see on the front, and that's held down and finished the bias and enclose that seam. So you're going to do that exact same thing now to the other side. And once you've done that, we're going to be ready to add the skirt. First thing we need to do when we are starting the skirt is to prepare the pockets. Now I've cut out 2 pairs, so 4 pieces total. So here are my first pair, and you can see that the edge is raw here. So you're going to want to finish all the way around like that, and the same on this side. So you're leaving this straight edge and this straight edge here not finished. Okay, that will be finished in a later step. So this is what I prepared earlier. I've always wanted to do that. Okay, here you go. This is what it looks like finished on the outer edges. Now we're going to grab our skirt pieces. This is what I cut out earlier. Now you'll notice that my skirt pieces look a little bit shorter than yours, and that is because they are. One of my testers did that. Now we're going to open up these skirt pieces, and we're going to grab our pocket pieces, and with right sides together, so right side here, you're going to match it just to the top edge of your skirt, like so, and then you're going to pin it in place. Now that I've finished pinning my pockets to the side seams on both skirt pieces, I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to sew from the top here down to this bottom edge where it curves in, and I'm going to sew that with 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once I have done that, I will then finish this whole edge in one go. Back from the machine, and I have attached all the skirt pieces to the pockets, and I have also finished down the side seams. And now what we can do is, with right sides facing each other, we are going to attach the pockets and skirt pieces together. And we're going to do that by pinning all the way on the outside edge here and then continuing down there. And we're going to do that on the other side as well. And then you're going to stitch that with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. While I'm at the machine, I like to do the next step at the same time. And that is your pocket lining up here, as you can see. And I've measured down 5 centimeters or 2 inches. And then you place a pin here so that you can sew right next to the previous stitching lines, right there, all the way to that marking. And then that will close up your pocket from the top. It's looking like a skirt. How exciting. So I've gone and stitched all the way around, and then I've done the stitch in here. So then if you turn it right side out, you can see you have a beautiful pocket. And look how ginormous that is. So fun. Okay, so now we are ready to gather our skirt. We're going to be putting gathering stitches of 2 rows here and here and here and here. But the important thing is you are not going to gather the pocket. So leave this out. Pretend like it's not there, okay? So you're going to be starting your gathering stitches from here. Okay? Same on the back side. Here and here. And then when it's time to gather it, then I will show you what we do with the pocket. I've gone ahead and done those gathering stitches. So you can see that on the right side and on the wrong side, but I have left my long tails right here, right before we get to the pocket. Okay, so that, if yours is looking like mine, then you've done it correctly. Okay, next we're going to now get ready to finish up our dress. We are going to now attach the skirt to the bodice, and what we're going to do is we're going to keep the right side of our skirt inside, wrong side on the outside, and then we're going to grab the bodice and we are going to match the side seams first, and you're going to make sure you're not grabbing the pockets yet, okay? So match the side seams, pin that in place, do the same for the other side. And then you are going to gather your front and your back skirt to match the bodice, and then you're going to pin that all in place. What do we do with the pockets now? You're going to find the front part of your bodice. So for mine, it is this side. So I'm going to just turn that this way. Then you're going to grab this pocket piece and you are going to push it to the front like so. And you're going to pin it in place. And you're just gonna pin it across, and make sure you remove the pins that you did for the gathering underneath, and just, that's what I like to do. I just like to pull it out and use it for the top layer, like so. And you're gonna do the same thing with the other side. And now we can take it to the machine, sew it with a 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, and then finish the raw edges in your chosen method. For me, it will be serging once again. Back from the machine, and you can see that I have stitched on the skirt and I have finished my edge. You can see my pockets there in the front, and I've taken out my gathering stitches. I'm gonna put it to the right side. And now we're ready for the last step. You're gonna hem your beautiful dress. And we're simply going to turn the raw edge in wrong sides together by 1 centimeter, and then again by 1 centimeter, and then you're going to edge stitch all the way around your skirt. And then you are done!